A female client, as my client was leaving our conference room at one point when we still had wooden doors, picked up her shoe and with a stiletto heel and hucked it, and it actually stuck in the door. Luckily, it didn't hit the client. There was a lot more action in family law back in the day. Now it's a little bit toned down.
I'm Julia.
And I'm Laura.
And we're divorce attorneys. And today we're going to be reviewing movies and TV shows about divorce. Here's a scene from the TV show All's Fair.
Grace, you might want to look away for this next one.
For those of you assembled who don't understand what you're looking at, if your brain can't quite compute it, let me break it down for you. This is Mr. Lionel in full fantastic fetish mode, dressed as a filthy piggy.
My initial thoughts are, this happens to me all the time. Extortion has become a real cause celeb for the family law realm. And when you're dealing with people that are high net worth or familiar celebrities, it's something, unfortunately, that we have to deal with a lot. Whereas the sexual peccadillos of people who are just normal Joes don't really come to the surface, and they don't have to worry about this kind of situation happening.
Unfortunately, a pretty common negotiation tactic in a divorce. This particular scene was in reference to Allura talking about how she wasn't afraid to litigate the prenuptial agreement. And so what they're using is this evidence as a way to get the husband to negotiate a more fair settlement for the wife who, signed away all of her rights. So again, I think that it's a really, in some ways, feels unfair in certain circumstances, but can be a really strategic negotiation tactic.
My eyes bled a little when I got a gander at this piece of high art, but that's just me.
Mr. Lee, there will be a day when what you're feeling right now will just be a memory. You signed the paper in front of you, and that day is here now. But if you choose to keep fighting, Grace, then that feeling is
Just the tip. It'll be so much more painful the deeper we go.
Enough! This is sick.
Well, let's also keep in mind, this evidence in this scene would not have been admissible in a court of law. That's why they've kind of taken it out of that realm, and what they're doing is saying, we're gonna go public with this. And so you don't need admissible evidence to give it to a media source. It's also not customary to keep this kind of evidence away from your client. I don't think either of us would ever have that surprise tactic. We would say to our client, we have this picture, we're going to show it in the conference room as we're negotiating. Are you cool with that? I can imagine certain clients being very upset that this was coming out or that we were using this. On the flip side, there are many times where a client will want you to be the mouthpiece, the advocate, and just go, I had no idea. But I don't think that any good attorney would do a surprise tactic. You could see that she was surprised. That probably wouldn't happen.
We are done. And the first thing that I'm going to do is file an official report to the State Bar and to the Attorney General's office.
No one's reporting anything to anyone anywhere.
Lionel,
Let's go.
this is unconscionable. Unconscionable.
I'd say 85% of the ones in our firm settle before. We're really resolution oriented. As I said, it's very expensive to go to trial. Sometimes we'll have kind of smaller mini hearings. They're called requests for orders. We'll go in to get temporary support. We'll go in to figure out where a child is going to school or summer camp, temporary custody things, temporary support things, temporary use of homes. But the full-blown trial on all issues, that usually takes more than a week or so, and it is prohibitively expensive, takes a very long time to work up to, and most people, again, especially in a 50-50 state where you're really looking at community property, there's not that many complex, complicated issues that you would need to try, and so most things end up settling.
I think All's Fair is a really artful representation of what it's like to be a family law attorney, specifically a divorce attorney. And it's fantasy. It's fun, it's dramatic. The outfits are beautiful. Everybody's having a glass of champagne after they win a case. And
I do that. They got that from me.
That's real.
This scene is from the movie Marriage Story.
He can be an asshole, and I can get really pissed off, and I'll call him on being an asshole.
All right, I'm gonna stop you there. When you do this for real, don't ever say that. People don't accept mothers who drink too much wine and yell at their child and call him an asshole. I get it. I do it too.
We definitely will instruct clients not to say certain things, not to write certain things in text messages or emails. Generally, they will have to do with being unnecessarily volatile, angry, threatening. We've seen a big rise in domestic violence allegations, so we don't want to see those. We really try to instruct parties that if they're going to have that kind of emotion, which one does when they get divorced, do it with friends, family members, mental health professionals. Don't do it aimed at your about-to-be ex.
And I think, Laura, in this particular scene, Scarlett Johansson is explaining that she occasionally calls her husband an asshole, right? And I think that's not gonna shock a family court judge. I think where you really need to caution clients is exactly what you said. When they start to put things in writing, when it's really disparaging language that, again, starts to border on abuse, that's when it can be used in a divorce action and be really detrimental.
We can accept an imperfect dad. Let's face it, the idea of a good father was only invented like 30 years ago. Before that, fathers were expected to be silent and absent and unreliable and selfish. And we can all say we want them to be different. But on some basic level, we accept them.
Oftentimes when clients first start their divorce process, it's not immediate litigation, right? There has to be a very real reason to immediately file a complaint for divorce, which commences litigation. Oftentimes it's a process of beginning with negotiation or even mediation. And I think really good family law attorneys will often recommend that, because if you can try and negotiate or mediate, it's gonna save the parties a lot of time and money and emotional turmoil.
Litigation is expensive. Prepping them for litigation is expensive because you have to put your witness on, whether it's at a deposition or testimony in a courtroom, and you have to make them as credible and believable in whatever the narrative that you're trying to convince your judicial officer of. And so that takes time.
And the dad isn't there. He didn't even do the fucking. God is in heaven. God is the Father, and God didn't show up. So you have to be perfect, and Charlie can be a fuck up and it doesn't matter. You will always be held to a different, higher standard. And it's fucked up, but that is the way it is.
This scene, it's brilliant. I've always felt that. But it is somewhat incendiary. Like, I didn't get the sense that the Scarlett Johansson character was feeling nearly as bad about being a mother as Nora Fanshawe, Laura Dern's character, was making her feel, and I fear sometimes family law attorneys will stir things up a little bit more. It's an amazing monologue, but the only thing in it that I really agree with is at the end where she says, and that's just how it is, because that is something we say to clients all the time. This is not fair. This is not good, but that's just how it is. Now let's move on with how we resolve it.
Yeah, I've never lectured my clients on theology.
But it's so good.
It's very dramatic for a movie.
I know Laura, and she actually called me and said, you're gonna be offended by this character. It's not you. It's a conglomeration of a lot of different family law attorneys that we all discussed. And so please don't be offended. She's a little bit more aggressive than you are. And the other attorneys you may recognize that are in the movie as, you know, people that we've taken things from as well. But you may actually be more like the Alan Alda character, who was really settlement oriented and stuff like that. And I said, okay, I'll take it with a grain of salt. This is a scene from 1979's Kramer versus Kramer.
Were you a failure at the one most important personal relationship in your life?
It did not succeed.
Not it, Mrs. Kramer. You. Were you a failure at the one most important relationship in your life? Were you?
The attorney's questioning on cross-examination of one of the parties is not accurate because, first and foremost, in today's age, and now this movie's from the 70s, but we have no-fault divorce. And what that means is you don't have to prove a fault ground for the reason for the divorce, whether it be alienation of affection or infidelity.
I agree with that. And do you notice how Dustin Hoffman's kind of shaking his head. Like, his divorce lawyer's even gone too far here. And I think that maybe back in the 70s was something that family law attorneys would employ to be the bad guy. That doesn't happen anymore. One of the most important things about this scene is we don't, and most of the people who do what we do not see divorce as a failure. We don't. We see it as an ending to one type of a relationship with a family member and then a moving on to a next chapter. So this continued asking her if it was a failure and she was a failure, it's just not something that you would hear these days. And again, that dovetails into the fault, because we do have no fault in most states now. But I did think it was interesting. Both of them are such great actors. And so when he's shaking his head, that does happen often, where you've got one party kind of saying, "Uncle, you've gone too far." And if I were representing her, in addition to saying irrelevant, which it is, the judge probably didn't make the right call there, you would say argumentative. You're not supposed to beat up on a witness. That makes zero sense. And it's not the most realistic portrayal, but I am told things were a little differently in the 70s and 79.
I agree, and like nobody wants an attorney who's all bent out of shape over their divorce, right? Like, you don't want to go to the doctor and the doctor starts crying and saying, "You have cancer, I don't know what to do." You know, you want an attorney who's dispassionate and who can strategize and take control of the situation and make you feel confident that the advice that they're giving you is the right path forward.
Next, we have a scene from The Roses.
What is happening?
Eleanor, you cannot bring in the dog.
It's my emotional support animal.
It's a dangerous dog.
Only when it feels I'm threatened.
It's a bullshit tactic and you know it.
Isn't this a bit of a weird cliche? You know, the ferocious divorce lawyer thing?
Well, I can't believe people say that I'm like the Laura Dern character. I want to be like the Allison Janney character. Or the dog, maybe.
Look, I just want the house.
Don't talk.
Oh, you're not having the house?
Don't talk. Okay, well, that seems like in our ballpark, so
okay, my client designed and built that award-winning fucking house that your sociopathic whore-hole of a client now claims as hers.
Hey! Whore-hole?
What? I thought the lawyers were being mean. Isn't that? No? It's part of the theater. Please don't talk. It's very undermining.
Let's be a little bit more British about this. Polite, courteous, rational.
Yeah, it's not like it's in our blood to pillage, murder, and enslave other cultures to get what we want.
Don't talk.
I think what is accurate about the scene is that Theo is really emotionally attached to the house. He designed it. And it's really common for individuals divorcing to become really emotionally attached to their home. It's oftentimes also their largest asset. What is important for clients to remember is that just because you are emotionally attached to a home, maybe you designed it, maybe you raised your kids there, it doesn't give you a greater right to that asset in division. It's a hard thing for a lot of people to accept.
One thing that I do find really interesting is when each of the family law attorneys keep saying to their client, "Don't talk, don't talk." There is a bit of a dog and pony show that's put on sometimes, and I'll have to take a client out and say, "You just know that he's doing this for his client, right? Like, the client needs to see it. We're doing a performance here. That's fine, but we'll get down to it." And sometimes my clients say, "Well, why don't you do that?" And I said, "I don't do that. I mean, I just don't. That's not how I roll. That's not how we do it. It usually works out. It's fine." But there are times when sometimes your client is talking too much. And so that "don't talk" I found to be a very interesting line that kept being repeated throughout the scene. The last generation of family law attorneys, when I started practicing law, there were a lot of old guys that did it, and there was a lot of yelling, and there was a lot of table banging, and there was a lot of... We don't do that as much anymore, because again, it's theatrics, and this is a business transaction. I have had a family law attorney, and I still don't know how he did this. This was like ninja. This was a guy that had to be in his 70s at the time, and he was overweight. He jumped up onto our conference room table, this guy. I thought he was gonna have a heart attack. I had another, not the lawyer, but the client, pick up one of the conference room chairs and throw it against the window. And a female client, as my client was leaving our conference room at one point when we still had wooden doors, picked up her shoe and with a stiletto heel and hucked it, and it actually stuck in the door. Luckily, it didn't hit the client. There was a lot more action in family law back in the day. Now it's a little bit toned down.
For those moments, is everything on the record?
Only if you have a court reporter and or a videographer. In this one, there wasn't. And my guess is they wouldn't have been behaving that way if there were. but there's often a court reporter writing everything down. And so, yeah, it's on the record. If you start a deposition and somebody's kind of, sometimes if they don't have a videographer, someone will say, please let the record show that Mr. So-and-so is making faces at my client, or the record will reflect that so-and-so slammed the table, because it's not like a script where it says slams the table, so you actually have to put it into the record.
Breath smells like an anchovy that's been on the piss all night. 3, the way he laughs is like a diseased dog's death rattle. 4, he's a bad father. A fucked lover, a complete dead shit, a victim, a loser, a wanker. Number 10, Theo, what a cunt.
That wasn't the task. Those are things you hate.
I think the scene is very realistic. I always say there's a fine line between love and hate in a divorce, and you see that here. I remember this one client, he spoke so passionately and so angrily about his soon-to-be ex-wife, but I knew that the minute she said, move back in, let's get back together, he would have done it. And I think that's the case for a lot of people.
Not them.
I feel like they're getting back together.
No way.
No?
No. But they had a moment. You can still have a moment with somebody even if you're not with them anymore.
But haven't you seen clients get back together?
Totally, just not them. Next up, we've got one of my favorite scenes from Wedding Crashers.
Did you have a band?
Yeah.
Good or bad?
Who gives a shit? It's a great band, it's a bad band, it's like pizza, baby. It's good no matter what, there's music in the air.
Playing, shout, you hate it, a little bit
hey, shout now. Jump up and shout now.
I think now I've decided, everyone says like, who really portrays you the best as a family law attorney? It's Vince Vaughn. He's so good, and I've done some mediation as the mediator, and you really do have to think outside of the box, do this dance to figure out how to get people back to a place where they're not hating the other person. I think they do a great job of it in this. It's funny, but like you see the level of hatred between these two people, and when she says, and my best friend and I say this to each other all the time, you shut your mouth when you're talking to me, it shows how irrational, it shows how people don't make any sense. And when the two mediators kind of get them to a place where they're willing to think and they're kind of look at each other and they're like, yeah, maybe that's right. And it's just so funny. It is thinking outside of the box in favor of resolution, and I love it.
I love this scene because they're talking about the frequent flyer miles, and that's ultimately what they're fighting over. It's often not about the asset, and it's really about control, right? I've had clients fight. I remember this one client spent like $10,000 fighting over sparkly wall art from TJ Maxx. No shade to TJ Maxx, but the cost-benefit analysis just wasn't there. And I think this is kind of an example of that, right? Vince Vaughn says, let's get this done. Let's not spend another year fighting over this. And it's a perfect example of the emotions tied to an asset in the divorce. I think divorce mediation is really common and a really healthy way to come to a mutually satisfactory resolution in a divorce. And a lot of times when clients would come in, divorce mediation is something that I would recommend initially if it seemed like both parties were willing to actively participate.
And what we see here is attorney-assisted mediation, so they've both got attorneys and they've got the mediators. A lot of times we'll use retired judges as mediators, so they really know what they're doing. They sat on the bench for a number of years. Now they're retired and they're kind of doing this as like a side gig. They're probably making more than they were making when they were sitting on the bench, but they know their stuff. They know what a judge would do, so they can say, if this doesn't settle here today, you're going downtown.
Guys, the real enemy here is the institution of marriage. It's not realistic, it's crazy.
I think the institution of marriage can be realistic if you approach it realistically, like what Hello Prenup would have you do in terms of educating yourself about the laws in your state and how you want your marriage to be governed. Back in the day when people only lived till their 30s or 40s, till death do us part was a lot more realistic than it is today when we're living to our 90s and 100s. We go through so many different phases and evolutions in life, which is why I don't think that divorce is a failure.
And the age of marriage in the United States is now 34 and a half on average. The average age of a Hello Prenup user is 37, right? So people are getting married later in life. They're approaching marriage very differently, and they're having those important conversations and communication prior to marriage about what they want their lives to look like.
This is another scene from Marriage Story.
If we start from a place of reasonable and they start from a place of crazy, when we settle, we'll be somewhere between reasonable and crazy.
Which is still crazy.
Half of crazy is crazy.
You know what people say, criminal lawyers see bad people at their best, divorce lawyers see good people at their worst.
There was 3 or 4 lines from here that are definitely things that we say. The thing about criminal law attorneys seeing bad people on their best behavior and family law attorneys seeing good people on their worst behavior, the crazy in the middle thing. You know, I've got attorneys that will say, well, if you give us $100 million, and I'm like, $100 million? And they just want, $10 million. So if you get half of crazy in between reasonable is still, it's those kinds of things that are just said, and they probably give family law attorneys a bad name, but it's not super inaccurate as to how things used to be.
And I think in certain instances you can start with reasonable and then start to turn up the heat if you need to. But if you start with crazy, oftentimes you're gonna get crazy back, right? The best negotiation tactic is often the threat of litigation, not the act of litigation. Once you've already started that nuclear war, it's really hard to pull back from. Here's a scene from the movie Law of Attraction.
Your Honor, I would like to move for continuance. It's come to our attention that discrepancies exist concerning the reporting of assets, namely several valuable works of art.
May I interject, Your Honor? You mean paintings, sculpture, that kind of stuff?
Exactly.
A motion for a continuance is when you need more time. You basically come in and say, I'm not prepared to go forward today for whatever reason, so I need a continuance, meaning we kick it out for 30 to 60 days.
I'd like to move for a continuance. I've just been retained as Mr. Harrison's counsel, and I haven't had time to fully research all aspects of the case. For instance, I have a receipt here for 6 28-day stays at the Piney Woods Rehab Center for Mrs. Harrison's treatment of sexual addiction.
It's not fun, and we definitely say to our clients, you must tell us the good, the bad, the ugly. I want to know everything, because otherwise we're going to be surprised, and it's going to look like not only did you withhold it from the court, but you withheld it from me, which is really bad. So we usually try to make that not occur.
And I would always try and remind clients, attorney-client privilege means that whatever they tell their attorney is privileged information and not discoverable. A lot of times people don't disclose everything to their attorney because they're afraid it's gonna come out in some way that they don't expect. Privilege is what keeps that information confidential.
And this is a scene from the show Sex and the City.
Mrs. McDougal is willing to offer her son's collection of mint-condition silver buffalo coins.
Can we get off the coin collection? She's not going to settle for a coin collection.
Well, according to the prenup...
This is ridiculous. Trey gave me that apartment. She gave him her word, till death do them part. Bunny, if you have something to say to me, Fine. I shall.
I strongly recommend we
Alan,
focus...
Hush.
That wasn't very realistic.
I've never seen that happen. I've seen parents get involved in the negotiation during a prenup more than I have during a divorce. And that's oftentimes because they're the ones that are pushing the prenup. They're the ones that are trying to protect whatever inheritance their adult child is going to receive in the future. But I have not seen that in a divorce. And in fact, do I think it's legally possible? Yes, but I think it's very important for the attorney to have a direct line of communication with their client. Now, there was one particular instance I could think of when a client was institutionalized, and so the only way to communicate with her was in some ways by proxy through her nurse until she got out, and that was a very difficult situation and not a common one.
Yeah, your proxy's your lawyer. I mean, Bunny didn't need to be there. She had no business being there.
Bunny had no business.
I guess it was her apartment, though, so maybe that's why. In which case, he shouldn't have been giving it away. What was he doing in Scotland? And didn't they split up because he wasn't having sex with her?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Does Bunny know that? I don't think she does. Just saying.
Yeah, I don't think Bunny knows the whole story. I think the depiction of family law attorneys in film and TV is really dramatic. It's really fun. It makes every day look like it's action-packed when that's not reality. Most of the time, divorce is slow moving. It's just not as entertaining as they make it look on TV.
The divorce rate in the United States remains at about 50%. And knowing that people are getting married later entering into prenups more frequently. I like that at least our country, but I know other ones as well, are becoming more hip to the process of marriage and then the end of those marriages if need be.